Good evening, everyone. I'm Earl Butch Graves Jr., CEO of Black Enterprise. I want to start by wishing everyone a happy and prosperous 2022. There's no denying that we're entering another year of economic challenge and uncertainty, in no small part due to the continuing pandemic. It's also true that there are financial obstacles and racial disparities that predate the COVID crisis, making it more difficult for Black-owned businesses to identify growth opportunities and remain viable. As the nation fights to regain its economic footing, there are serious concerns that the recovery will merely result in a permanent return to the status quo. Clearly, that's unacceptable. And that's why Black Enterprise, the #1 Black digital media brand with more than 9 million monthly unique visitors, kicks off the new year with tonight's Economic Equity and Racial Justice Town Hall, Black Business Development, creating greater access to capital and contracts. Back in the summer of 2020, we witnessed the resurgence of a national reckoning on racial justice. Corporate America and a myriad of government leaders joined the call, expressing unprecedented solidarity with Black Americans in addressing systemic barriers and promising a new day of equity and representation. It's 2022, and those commitments still remain largely unfulfilled. So have major corporations and government agencies really taken substantive actions to level the playing field? That's the question we will indeed answer tonight. Our goal is to move the needle forward for Black business growth and success. We've assembled a truly dynamic panel that intimately knows the challenges and will offer expert insights and recommendations on comprehensive strategies to drive Black entrepreneurial advancement. Our panelists include Mark Morial, President and CEO of the National Urban League; Cheryl McKissick-Daniel, President and CEO of McKissick & McKissick, Inc., the nation's oldest Black-owned construction company; Yvette Henry, VP of Global Strategic Sourcing at Kennametal, Inc., and Wole Coxum, President of Mobility Capital Finance, or MoCaFi. And of course, we're excited to have our Town Hall Series moderator and CNN commentator, Bakari Sellers, to lead this very important discussion. On behalf of Black Enterprise, I want to thank Bakari and our panelists for their participation. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining us virtually. At this time, I would like to express my appreciation to our partner and sponsor of our Town Hall Series, the Executive Leadership Council, the leading organization of Black global entrepreneurs and executives. Now to provide remarks is Valerie Rainford, founder and CEO of Ellery Talent Strategies and board secretary of the Executive Leadership Council. Welcome, Valerie.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Butch. My name is Valerie Rainford, founder and CEO of Ellery Talent Strategies and board secretary of the Executive Leadership Council. The Executive Leadership Council is proud to sponsor Black Enterprise's Economic Equity and Racial Justice Town Hall Series. On behalf of ELC, I am pleased to welcome you all back for an important discussion on Black business development and the need to create greater access to capital across the Black business community. Two of tonight's panelists are our very own ELC members who positively impact Black business in their own right. Yvette Henry Vice President of Global Strategic Sourcing at Kennametal Incorporated, impacts Black business from a corporate procurement angle, and my friend and former colleague, Wole Coxum, founder and CEO of Mobility Capital Finance Incorporated, or Mochify, a digital banking platform designed exclusively for and serving more than 50 million underserved individuals across the country. Yvette and Wole, thank you for your participation and all that you do to advocate for Black people and Black business. Like Wole, I too left corporate America a few years ago to launch Ellery Talent Strategies, a consulting firm where our focus is on driving measurable outcomes and accountability that advances racial equity and specifically advances Black people into leadership positions in corporate America. Like Wole and many others, I am an entrepreneur member of the ELC. Black entrepreneurs play a vital role in our community's continued efforts to eradicate systemic racism and specifically increase wealth creation. We understand the ongoing impact the pandemic continues to have on our community and on the well-being of Black businesses. In fact, we know that the pandemic has only exacerbated the inequities that Black entrepreneurs face. In this town hall series, we want to explore new ways to build meaningful business partnerships and develop viable, self-sufficient growth opportunities while helping to expand access to capital for Black-owned companies, large and small, to thrive in today's uncertain economy. There truly is no better time to invest in Black business development and to learn more about how you can help advocate for the advancement of Black businesses. Tonight's expert panelists will share their perspectives of what is at stake, as well as where they see opportunities to advance more equitable economic outcomes for the Black business community. Without further ado, I'd like to turn the program over to Bakari Sellers, New York Times bestselling author of the book, My Vanishing Country, a Memoir, and CNN political correspondent. Bakari will moderate tonight's panel discussion entitled Black Business Development, Creating Greater Access to Capital and Contracts. Thank you, Black Enterprise, for creating this important dialogue, and to all of you for joining tonight's program.
Good evening. My name is Bakari Sellers. I've been here before. You've seen me here before as moderator for these Black Enterprise town halls. Today is another amazing town hall where we talk about Black business development. I'm a CNN political commentator, former member of the South Carolina State House, but today I'm moderator for this amazing panel. I think one of the things that we always talk about when we're talking about living in this new reality of COVID and this pandemic is that this pandemic has ripped the Band-Aid off the systemic inequities we see in our communities. This pandemic has intensified the long-standing inequities that continue to make it tough for Black-owned businesses to endure this ongoing crisis and gain pathways for recovery. Today, we're going to talk about the challenges, but as I always do on all of these town hall panels, we're not just going to find ourselves in a lull talking about the challenges, but we're also going to talk about some solutions, which is why I'm extremely happy today to have this, I guess the word may be August panel. That's my SAT word for the day. I'm going to start by introducing this panel, and then we'll hop right into the discussion, because we all know that center to this Black experience, center to becoming full citizens, is economic equity, economic equality, and it starts with Black business development. And we have 4 experts here today. I'm going to start with my good friend, a hero of the movement, Mark Morial. He's president and CEO of the National Urban League. Mark, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today, Mr. Mayor, as I call him affectionately. Cheryl McKissick Daniel, president and CEO of McKissick & McKissick, the nation's oldest Black-owned construction company, which in itself says a lot. We stand on your shoulders, all the small business owners, the growing business owners, the Black-owned businesses stand on your shoulders. So thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
We have Wole Coxum, founder and CEO of Mobility Capital Finance, Inc. How you doing, my brother? It's good to see you and have you here with us today. We'll figure out what that, you can't hide money, what that expensive artwork is in the background, but we will get to that as well. And last but not least is Yvette Henry, who's the VP, and her title says Global Strategic Sourcing at Kennametal, Inc. So welcome. I want to start here because I want you to give a little introduction in your background, because a lot of this, I think, for people is learning experiences. They want to see how people got where they are. They want to know how you founded a business, or how you're in capital finance, or how you're a part of the Urban League, or how you become VP and sit in a C-suite. So talk about the arc of your career, but in that discussion, also lay out some of the challenges as you see today in this, I would say post-pandemic, but we have Omicron in my house right now. I mean, my wife is just getting through COVID. So talk about the challenges that you see for Black businesses and Black business development as you talk about the arc of your career and where we are now. I'm gonna start with you, Ms. Henry.
So for me, I've been in manufacturing for over 25 years. I've worked in the auto industry, in the medical device, medical care, personal care industry, and now in industrial manufacturing. So for the past 25 years, I've been reviewing contracts, reviewing proposals, awarding business. And of course, we're always looking for the best suppliers, those who can perform and be competitive. And with that, I'm always looking for the opportunity to be diverse in our sourcing selection. It's been a challenge, and I've found that the organizations that have a more rigorous program in place to try to make sure that there's a level playing field for Black businesses are those who tend to succeed with having a higher content of their supply base be women-owned, minority-owned type enterprises. But it's also a challenge and a pleasure to be able to award business and to want to grow entrepreneurs. And so with that, I will continue to support the efforts to try to increase that as much as possible.
Sure. Ms. McKissick, have you seen anything like this climate that we're in today? How's your company surviving? What are you seeing out there, the problems that are affecting us now? And talk about the arc and how you got to this point.
Well, as you said, Bakari, our company is 115 years old, but actually I am 5th generation in the McKissick family of contractors and builders and designers. And so our family has been in this country since 1790. So we have overcome slavery, Jim Crow. We have overcome everything you can think of, the prejudice of the Deep South. So, when we look at this pandemic compared to a lot of the other issues we've had to overcome as a family, it's affecting not just Black people, it's affecting everyone. So while it's affecting us like it is everyone else, it's not just affecting, Black people. And I think that's important to discuss. As far as construction, as you know, early on, a lot of projects were shut down. We did not know, unless they were deemed essential, could they continue? And so during those periods, we had people who couldn't go to work. We couldn't bill for them. And so it did have an impact financially on our firm. But over time, because of the type of work that we do, most of our employees went back to work. But now with the new variant of Omicron, it's day to day, if you ask me. We are in the process of trying to figure out, should we get new office space in New York? Our lease is up in next 6 months. And so we're just trying to find our way, and it literally is day to day.
I mean, that's a good way to look at it. I mean, you can't eat a whole elephant without the first bite, right? It's one step at a time. It's one day at a time. And getting through this pandemic with healthy businesses, growing your business is one day at a time. Mark Morial, talk to me. You are a national advocate. You run an advocacy organization that deals directly with this issue. Where are we? From the health, not a public health perspective, but the health of our Black businesses and Black business development. Where are we?
So thank you, Bakari, and thank you for what you do. You make us proud when we see you on the national stage, dropping it down and dropping the truth on the political affairs of our times. And it's great to be with all of the other panelists today. So let's go back to some baseline numbers, and that is, according to the best information, the pandemic caused some 40% plus of all Black-owned business to either shut down temporarily or close. That's a stunning number. I think for the mainstream community, it may be in the 15 to 20% range. So that's double what it was. Secondarily, it goes without saying that most Black-owned businesses are small in size and small in scale. Some 85 to 90% of them have only one employee. It's the owner and it's the proprietor. And thirdly, Black-owned businesses have been historically undercapitalized. So all of that has meant that it has been a rough ride for many Black-owned businesses. On the other side, the horrific George Floyd murder compelled and spurred a reaction which now you are beginning to see with a renewed effort to address the capital requirements or the capital deficit or the capital access issues of Black-owned businesses. You see a much greater conversation in the public square, in the public policy arenas, think the infrastructure bill, about Black business participation. So while the pandemic has been devastating, there are opportunities on the horizon. And I think that the infrastructure bill creates a set of opportunities, but it's going to require commitment. It's going to require advocacy. It's going to require pressure on everyone from the White House to the agencies, to every governor and legislator, to mayors and transit authorities and airports, to live up to the commitment the president made, but also to live up, Bakari, to the commitment of the law. Executive Order 11246, the old Parent Mitchell set-aside laws that remain on the books in most agencies. All of that provides some pathways for opportunities. But the difficult problems, access to capital, access to contracts, access to connections, access to customers, remain the great challenge for Black businesses. Final thing I'll say, building Black businesses is a way to close the racial wealth gap. Wealth in this country comes from property ownership and business ownership and ownership in businesses through stocks and bonds. That's where wealth comes from: property ownership, business ownership, and investment in businesses through stocks and bonds. And so in this moment that we are in, to close the wealth gap requires a range of things, but Black business participation, I believe, is a strategy we've got to elevate and embrace.
So you actually hit on a couple of salient points that we're going to get to on our next topic about this moment. But before that, Wole, I wanted to talk to you just about how you got to where you are and what you're seeing from your perch about the moment that we're in.
It's a great question. And I also just want to echo the appreciation to be a part of this such august group. So my career is an interesting model, right? I spent 20 plus years in financial services, Citigroup, Willis, which is an insurance broker, and most recently JP Morgan, where I became one of the most senior people at JP Morgan, not just Black person, but most senior person in the organization. And I had my George Floyd moment after the death of Michael Brown. And I wanted to figure out a way that I could use my talents and my experience in financial services to do what Mark just talked about, which is how do we close the racial wealth gap in this country? And what Ferguson demonstrated to me was that a social justice agenda without an economic justice agenda is like one hand clapping. And I would much rather spend the remaining part of my career trying to build a strong economic agenda that would allow us to have a compelling overall agenda as a community. And so I quit my job. And started on the journey of understanding that technology can be a huge opportunity to level the playing field in terms of providing financial products and services that allow individuals to start businesses, to invest in property, and to invest in stocks and bonds that allow them to take advantage of the wealth opportunity in this country. And so that's what I did. We started a company, a fintech mobile first company focused on closing the racial wealth gap in this country, and excited about exploring that more in terms of tangible things that we as a community can do to move ourselves forward.
You know, I wanted to piggyback on something that Mark stated earlier as he laid out the central issues that we'll talk about today when it comes to Black business development. Those things are lack of capital access, lack of those business building relationships, and I think you called it a customer access to customers. You know, I will grow on that and say growth opportunities as well, and expand that a little bit to include growth opportunities. So those are some of the issues that we've seen. But as well as being in this pandemic, we're also in, Yvette, I'll toss this to you. We're also in this post George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery moment. I say the streets were white hot back in 2019. It's been that long, back in the summer of 2019. And there were a lot of commitments, a lot of promises made, and you're in corporate America. So for people watching, talk about some of the things we can continue to push corporations to do for us, but also some of the things Black businesses can do to go out and help hold these companies accountable and reap the benefits of some of these promises that were made.
Yeah, so there's been some tangible programming that have been done by many, I would say Fortune 100 companies, even wider, in terms of whether it's coming from the CEO, coming from certain businesses, really putting their commitment toward a dollar value or an increased awareness on awarding businesses to Black entrepreneurs and to Black suppliers. And we've seen that to happen, possibly not at the rate of which many of us would like to see, but there's definitely been an increasing trend in awarding businesses and services. You know, you couple that with the pandemic and what's happening with the global supply chain, it does create an opportunity. You know, you can think back to 2019, over $2 trillion of exports came out of China to support markets in Europe and as well as markets here in North America. Pundits say up to 1/3 of that export dollars will not return. So what you're seeing is a gradual rebalancing of our supply chain. You're going to see increasing needs for us to have suppliers domestically. We need suppliers who can provide those goods and services within the US. It won't happen overnight because particularly if you're supporting manufacturing, to qualify a good takes a fair amount of time from a quality and engineering standpoint, but that business is there. And that opportunity is there for Black-owned businesses to take a portion of that rebalancing that's going to occur over the next 12 to 18 months.
I want everybody to take a shot at this question because many people who are watching this, they are either thinking about starting their own business. I don't want y'all to all just quit like, well, they did and go out. I mean, if you feel the spirit, then quit, but like have a job when you walk out the door, or an idea at least. But I do want people to tackle this question of not only how do we hold them accountable, but from a business perspective, what are some of the things that Black businesses can be doing right now to take advantage and prepare themselves for these opportunities that apparently presented themselves? Because Mark, I believe that the window is closing. I mean, I may be wrong and I may be naive, but the momentum we had post George Floyd seems to be dwindling away.
Yeah,
I have
well,
that
Bakari,
sense too.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Shelley.
Bakari, I have to say,
Cheryl, jump in first.
I just want to say, you know, it's been a lot of talk. And, you know, you hear from Fortune 100 corporations that they want to engage Black businesses, but a lot of it is talk because they don't really know how to do it. We, as in the design and construction industry, we have presented proposals, done presentations, and you walk into a room full of all white men. I don't know how they're going to make a selection or change their selection pattern by having a selection committee that doesn't look anything like us. That's like a simple place to start. The other thing that really just really gets on my nerves, and that is the government agencies have been doing this for 30 years, and they're the best at it. They set goals, they make sure they meet those goals, and corporations are like starting from scratch. Why not go to these public agencies and understand what their model is and just institute those models in corporate America? It seems straightforward if you really want to do it.
Mark, you were about to chime in, but Ms.
I
McKissick
think
has some stuff to get off her chest. She has some stuff she was going to say on
No,
that.
I think one thing that's fascinating, Bakari, is the manner in which scalable Black businesses have changed in the civil rights post-segregation era. We used to be, and this is really a legacy of the Black communities of the South, but to some extent the Black communities of northern cities, when white businesses would not sell to us, would not hire us, and we were not welcome, an entire ecosystem of Black-owned businesses sprouted up. In my beloved hometown of New Orleans, relatives on my mother's side owned grocery stores, gas stations, florists, funeral homes, and an insurance company. There's a Black-owned cleaners, Black-owned contractors, Black-owned meat market. You could literally keep your dollar in the Black community, in the community that I grew up in. Black-owned businesses today, other than many of the very smallest of business, like barbers and cosmetologists and others, are in the B2B and B2C space. If you look at the Black enterprise, top 25, top 35, top 45, even the top 100, they're selling to government, they're selling to the private sector, invariably. And our community has changed. Our business community, our Black business community has changed. As such, Black business owners, if there's one thing they could do, is be stronger advocates. Be stronger voices and advocates for the success and the viability of supplier diversity programs in the corporate sector, to ensure that every city, state, school board, and transit authority, particularly where we have political influence, is true to the idea that government agency that these elected officials lead and influence ought to be doing more business with Black-owned businesses, that they ought to have a minority business strategy, minority business goals, minority business set-aside programs in order to be able to increase the share of work going to Black-owned businesses. Post-segregation, the integrated America has changed the way in which the Black business community, who is the Black business community, not completely, but by and large. And we need to understand that, and we need to know that. Bottom line, Black business owners, be advocates for participation, for your cause, for the broader cause of economic inclusion and economic participation.
I would agree with that, and just to build upon that, I think it's important to be both on the inside of the game as well as on the outside. So Bakari, everyone shouldn't quit their job to start a company. Potentially, actually, to the earlier points, actually work within their organizations to advocate, to be around the table. So when someone like Cheryl shows up in terms of how that organization can support a Black business, they're in the room where it happened, and to be able to advocate for that contract. At the same time, I think it is important to go outside and sometimes look at where the opportunity is, whether it is in transit. I think the infrastructure bill is going to create lots of opportunity for building. There is an opportunity for people to create entities that can solve the problem with all this money that's coming out of the federal government, coming out of state and local government, or going to state and local government, to create an entity that can take advantage of these contracts. And I think part of the focus that is on both corporate America as well as the municipalities to spend money with Black contractors is high. So the more we can advocate for that, the better I think we're well positioned to take advantage of it. I will say, while some corporations are struggling, we in our business model have been able to partner well with large corporations, because they're looking for ways to get stuff done and ways to have an impact so they can fulfill their promise. So what we've spent a lot of time thinking about is, what can we do? How can we use our business model in a way that allows for some of the larger financial services institutions to fulfill their promise? And we want to be the beneficiary of that. So I think it's not all bad, but you do have a series of institutions that are in a place where they got to do something. The CEO's in the hot seat. He or she needs to be able to say, I've made the commitment. Here's what I have delivered. And we're trying to position ourselves to be able to be the conduit where they put their time and their talent.
Well,
I
I
would
want to
to
go ahead.
what
I'm sorry,
Wole was
Yvette.
saying. Yeah, sure. To add to what Wole was saying about the accountability side within corporations, the investor demographics are changing. Younger investors are looking at a company's sustainability strategy. What's in your ESG report? And with that comes the accountability of diversity in your suppliers that you're using and how you're awarding business. Investors are watching and they're seeing how companies are actually making good on those promises. So just the change in demographic in investors will continue to create a space where the accountability will be very visible, transparency will be required, and those who are not following what they're going to do will see the repercussions of that. So just that change alone will create a space where I believe we'll continue to see more business awarded to Black enterprises.
Well, I wanted to stay with you and Yvette, really. One of the things that Mark brought up, and Mark chime in after they get a chance here, is the ways to build wealth. He talked about Black ownership, but he also talked about from this investment perspective, ownership of shares or ownership of stock or ownership of an actual company. And with that being said, I wanted to, well, maybe you can give us some insight about the corporate programs, and are they really expanding the number of viable startups? And are you seeing in the work that you do, Black startups have an opportunity to go out and be successful and grow and incubate? Look at that. I've been reading stuff in Silicon Valley. I use incubate. So are they getting an opportunity to do those things? And can Black folk go out there and get many of those same opportunities that the white boys have been doing for so long?
We're starting, if it was, starting the race from the same spot, I'd say no problem. But we're starting at a deficit. And so it's going to take a long time for us to get just to even. But I will say that there's been a significant amount of capital that has been allocated, significant yet not sufficient. So let me be clear that we're not done here. But there has been lots of capital that's been set aside or allocated to investing in Black and women-led startups, technology startups, infrastructure startups, and the like. And we are seeing the benefit of that. And we, as a company, have the good fortune of MasterCard invested in us, Citigroup invested in us, several other firms invested in us, and they've invested in others. And people are saying, tell us where there are other companies like Mocafy or other companies in the fintech space or the technology space broadly. We want to put our dollars to work. And so I think it's interesting, though, and important for corporates to continue to develop individuals in the corporate environment so they can go off and start companies. As at the same time, individuals need the opportunity to go out and have access to where these capital providers are, but it's still not sufficient. It's increased, and there are a lot of individuals who've started funds, who've gotten allocations so they can invest in Black businesses. I think we're moving in the right direction, but we're starting at such a deficit that a lot more work and capital needs to be allocated, and we need more individuals who might be watching this evening to say, you know what, I'm going to go out on faith. And we as a community need to get a little bit back to what I'll call civil rights era economics, where we do support our Black businesses. And Mark is 100% right in terms of the evolution of businesses in the Black community. But we need to, as a community, continue to support each other, because things start at home. And if we're able to support our own businesses, that puts us in a position to be able to scale significantly. And one last thing is that I do think, because we've operated from a position of scarcity, historically as businesses, we have not always thought in terms of the grand idea. And so one thing that I would like our communities to think about is, let's think boldly, let's think at a level of scale, because the size of the ask of an investor should only be limited by the size of the idea. And so we have the capabilities. It's so funny. The Green Book was Airbnb before Airbnb. We came up with that.
Yep.
We came up with that. And Mark, the history of your family and being entrepreneurs, we're not new to this game. But over time, we have been moved into a place of scarcity that has limited our imagination. So if there's one ask that I have is, as we go on this entrepreneurial journey, let's have big imaginations that allow us to have big asks of capital providers so we can build businesses that can scale and create wealth for our communities.
Hey, what Wole is saying is throw deep, go long. Really don't think small. But one thing I would add, and I think you've identified that, I've had the opportunity in the last 2 years to meet some dynamic young entrepreneurs, several of them Black women who are building venture-backed companies in the tech space, in the security space, in the biopharma space. And it's really been exciting because they bring to the table incredible educational credentials. They bring to the table, in some instances, a stint in corporate America, in big business, or in investment banking. But they bring to the stint this grit and this determination and these ideas. So this is not a community of people I believe I may have met 15 years ago. But now they are out there. Now they are working. Now they are hustling. Last evening, I had a chance to speak to one of them, and they just wanted to sort of pick my brain about potential customers, networking, sort of Rolodex sharing, feedback. It's exciting. They're not that visible. This is why we have to have Black enterprise, right? This is why JET was so important. This is why the Black media is so important, because it gives visibility to many of these young entrepreneurs, many of these who are doing things differently. Two of these entrepreneurs are in the second round of funding. They've gone through seed and an initial round. They are building their businesses. They have advisory councils. They have customers. They're doing what other entrepreneurs do. Here's the point. We've got this broad private equity community that still needs to understand the force and the power of the Black marketplace in America. The fact that a Cheryl McKissick can build or do what anyone else can do. To understand also that we have people inside who are responsible for the diversity spend of companies. We have assets to work with. Yeah, we're operating from a position of scarcity, but like we have historically done, we're also operating from a position of grit, determination, and nerve. And I want Black business owners to lift their voices much more loudly to affirm, as Wole has affirmed, that a social justice movement is important, but without an economic justice component, we're clapping with one hand. It's a great quote, Wole. I'm going to borrow it from you generously, if you'll allow me to.
I'm not going to give them any attribution either. They're going to be like, that boy's smart. I'm just going to steal it. Yvette or Cheryl, do you want to comment? Because I want to talk about something that Ms. Cheryl talked about recently, but do you guys want to talk about the viability of startups and African Americans in this space? I will tell you that I just started my investing recently in startups, seed rounds, series A, B, C, and everything from liquor, ice cream to renewable batteries. I didn't know anything about it, but my investment philosophy is simple. I invest in things that I think are the future and things that I like. But no one taught me anything. I'm learning as I go. So Yvette, what are some of the lessons that we're learning about this startup space? And and some of the things that we can push people to do more of. So I truly believe that's the next frontier for Black wealth building.
Yeah, I would say to your point around collaboration, right? So one of the things that we're seeing is that there's a higher success rate when businesses are able to collaborate with one another and come to the table. It creates a space where there's perceived less risk in bringing on that new business or new supplier. And for them, it gives them strengths to bring on a partner where they're complementary to a good or service that they're offering. And also in this space around, I bring up sustainability and let's not underlook what's the apparent opportunity here around the environmental and sustainability aspect. So whether your good or service is offering lower CO2 emissions, eco-friendly materials, environmentally conscious services and goods that you're offering, this also creates a space where you're getting kind of a twofer. It's not just you're a Black-owned business, but you're a business that's helping a corporation achieve other goals that are also being measured consistently. So these are things to think about, and you may be able to achieve that goal through the collaboration and the partnership of another Black business and working together when submitting proposals.
So
can I just pick? Oh, sorry.
Let me get
Black,
Cheryl, and I'll come back to you, Ole, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Okay, Black entrepreneurship is very important. And I am working with a model right now that I am extremely proud of. In New York City, there are very few Black-owned engineering firms. And so a colleague of mine, John Rice, who was a managing partner at a very large mechanical, electrical, plumbing, engineering design firm in New York, he and I got together and we started a firm called Legacy Engineering 2 years ago with the sole purpose of bringing in Black engineers, teaching them to become owners, and then turning over the company to them. It started with the two of us. We currently have 12 engineers working for us. 4 of them are Black men, and we are teaching them to be owners, and we hope that in the future, they will take over this company. So we are creating spin-off engineering firms, design and construction firms using that type of a model.
Good for you. That's so inspiring. And I actually think that is reminiscent of how we in the civil rights era, pre-civil rights era, helped each other out from a community building perspective. So that seems to me like you're carrying on the tradition. There's a reason why your company's been around for over 100 years. The one thing that I wanted to just pick up on in terms of Yvette's point, which is oftentimes, particularly for small companies, small Black-owned companies, larger companies, white companies, mainstream companies want to do business, but they're concerned about it. Or even government wants to do business with you, but they're concerned, do you have the capital? Do you have the financial wherewithal to, if I give you this contract, you can actually deliver against it? And I actually think that is a real interesting opportunity to take some of these businesses, large corporations who've made a commitment to the Black community, say, got it. I want to go after a particular contract with City X. And I do think the number, and we're following in what Mayor Morial has started and been a part of, which is there are lots of Black mayors across the country, right? And if we as entrepreneurs can provide a service that supports it, and McKissick is taking advantage of that, right? Cheryl, in terms of you now have a Black mayor in the city of New York, which is going to further accelerate this. That being said, if you can go to a mainstream white business and say, hey, be my partner as I try to deliver on this service, and negotiate it so you get the lion's share of the economics, but be my partner and then de-risk it for an entity to make that award. And that's what we did in Los Angeles. So our company has built a financial ecosystem for the bottom third of the pyramid. There are 500,000 people in Los Angeles who are unbanked. And we've created an Angelino Connect program, and we're replicating in different cities across the country, including New Orleans, including Birmingham and other places. And the different mayors were comfortable because we put together a consortium of partners that de-risk the decision. and we're overperforming, which is what we as Black people do, where it's creating other opportunities for us all across the country. So that's just one way to think about how you can use this moment with large corporations to rent their balance sheet as well as their overall reputation to allow you to win business and build a sustainable company.
I want to piggyback on something you said, and it was brought to my attention from something Cheryl actually talked about earlier, which was the way that government does things, especially when it comes to this procurement, et cetera, better than many of the corporate companies or private companies. My good friend, I have to use this as a segue to give a shout out to Frank Scott in Little Rock and Randall Woofin in Birmingham, Alabama, and Chokwe Lumumba in Jackson, Mississippi, Mayor Cantrell down in Louisiana, Vi Lyles, Andre Dickens. So yes, we have a lot of mayors, and we all know that Atlanta is the capital of the United States of America anyway. And so we have a lot of Black mayors throughout the South particularly. And so that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, have major companies and governmental agencies, including these cities, at the point we are now, have they significantly increased procurement spend and facilitated access to some of these larger contracts for Black firms? And Cheryl, I wanted you to kind of lay out where we are with that, because it's something that you brought up earlier. I'm interested to see what you've seen in the first 12 months of the Biden administration, which probably isn't a fair metric, but what you've also seen from some of these Black cities and some of these larger corporations as well.
Yes, I can definitely say that the municipalities, the government agencies definitely are increasing their MWBE spend and requirements. Right now, the city of New York is at 30%, but maybe under our new mayor, Eric Adams, will maybe get to 50%. What you always hear is there's no capacity, when in reality, disparity studies have shown that there is 50% capacity in the city of New York. And so we can continue to increase these numbers. On some RFPs, it's 40%. So I definitely am seeing an increase on government contracting, but the onus should not just be on government. We know that there is much more spend in the private sector, and the private sector definitely needs to step up in that regard. Now, have we seen an outreach? Absolutely. Have we picked up new corporate clients since the George Floyd moment? Absolutely. But there's still a learning curve for these companies with respect to how to do business with Black people. And I want to just add on to what Wally said earlier about collaborating with larger firms. And I think that is terrific when you are building your business and you are building your credibility in a market. But there comes a time where you want to be the prime, where you want to be the person in control of your destiny. You want to be the Black firm that is just good, not that you have to collaborate to get a project because someone's concerned that you cannot service a contract. And so I think it's important that we build to that, and that we remember that there are a lot of Black firms out there who can, supply the services on their own. Where we are missing a lot is in real estate development. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Recently, under JFK Terminal 1, the owners are Carlisle, Magic Johnson, and Jim Reynolds from Loop Capital. That whole model right there is a model set up for success with respect to MWBE firms, because the ownership is 30% MWBE. And as a result, there's an ecosystem that will come out of this project from the very beginning all the way to the end. Also, a diverse workforce is being required by these owners because they're Black. And so if we can get more Black people into these positions, then I think it'll create a lot more equity for us.
Mark, I see you nodding and humming along. Tell me what your thoughts are.
So I think one of the things, the theme of the African-American mayor is an important historical theme. Obviously, the legendary Maynard Jackson, my father served in that era. They cracked the door open. A municipality is a business.
Amen.
A multi-million-dollar, depending on the size of the city, business.
And Mark, I don't mean to cut you off, but nobody did it better than Marion Barry. Continue.
Yeah, Marion Barry also. I mean, and they open the doors. It is my hope that the mayors of this generation are determined and intentional about not only doing what they can do to increase the procurement that they do with minority or Black-owned businesses, but that they leverage their assets. So, for example, when I was mayor of New Orleans, Harris built a casino on city-owned land. We had to negotiate both a lease and a development agreement with that casino corporation. Within that development agreement were requirements for minority business participation, for African-American women jobs participation in the operations and in the procurement of the casino. By the very same token, where cities deploy their land, their tax incentives, their zoning approvals, there's leverage to push the envelope of economic inclusion in these cities. So this generation of mayors, I think, has an opportunity to even go beyond what the legends were able to do by using their leverage on economic development projects writ large in terms of the community. We are building, the National Urban League, a building here in New York. We have a Black lead developer. We have African-American contractors involved. We had African-American investment bankers on the financing side. We have 177 units of affordable housing, a civil rights museum. I think it is about leveraging your power wherever you can. Power concedes nothing without a demand. And the demand for economic inclusion has to be right up there with justice system reform, right up there with reform of the relationships between police and communities. We have to ensure, as, quote, a progressive agenda emerges in America, that it is not devoid of racial economic justice. Racial economic justice, inclusion for Black-owned businesses in the rebuilding of the future. So whether it's climate change, will that movement include opportunities in the green economy for Black-owned businesses? Whether it's about technology, whether it's about the infrastructure bill. This is where the voices of Black civil rights leaders, elected officials, and business owners has to apply new pressure. We can't get goo-goo gaga and sit in the proverbial back of the bus as we allow a green economy to develop, and we are not central to that economy in terms of the economic opportunity and the wealth that's going to be created. So today, we've got to look back and understand the tech revolution did not economically empower Black people. The dot-com revolution did not economically empower Black people. We've got to do this differently with the climate revolution, and we've got to make sure the climate revolution is a true climate economic justice revolution.
Amen to that. Well, Yvette, do you guys have anything to add to, and particularly as we're talking about what's being done in terms of procurement and these contracts from the government side? Are you seeing anything from the corporate side as well that we either need to be concerned about or excited about? Yvette, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I think we need to be excited about the fact of what gets measured gets done. And as companies are actually proclaiming a certain percentage of their spend or revenues that will be awarded to diverse suppliers, we know that that company will then make good on that promise. It gets back to making sure that not only what's measured gets done, but we're also creating a space where we're casting the net wide enough to make sure that those contracts are being awarded to minority businesses. So very similar to what Cheryl had mentioned about when you find a model that works, whether it's a development project within the airport system, when we find that model that works, we need to share more across organizations to figure out, okay, here's another opportunity for us to bring on new development, awarding new business, but definitely we're going to see a change. Again, it may not be at the pace in which it has happened in the past, but definitely moving in the right direction.
I would agree with that. And as an entrepreneur, well, as a Black person broadly, and as an entrepreneur specifically, you always have to have hope and you always have to be optimistic. And I think that what we're seeing now is a hopeful moment, and I have a tremendous amount of optimism. And I really like how Mark positioned it, that you have people in positions of power who can use assets broadly defined to leave a legacy of entrepreneurship and home ownership, quite frankly. And we have been well trained all along, but we have folks in our community who are as well trained, if not better trained, than anybody. And we now just need to bring these pieces together. And I think I was really compelled by something Yvette said in terms of this ESG moment has corporations, particularly publicly traded corporations, yearning for things that they can point to that they're doing so they can check the box. Because what's happening is there are rating agencies or evaluating agencies that are looking at publicly traded companies and saying, what are you doing from an ESG perspective, and giving them a grade. And that grade will make them more or less attractive to investors. And if we can harness that opportunity with a good idea and ask for capital, ask for partnerships, I think, Cheryl makes a great point in terms of being your own standalone entity, the best that you are, so you don't need partnerships. I think that is something that we all want to evolve into. But wherever you are in the continuum, use this ESG opportunity as a way to really either embarrass companies or provide a solution for embarrassed companies that they can then turn around to make themselves more attractive to the overall market. So we got to play four-dimensional chess on this game, but we can do that. And I think I'm optimistic that we can win there.
We're in a moment right now though, guys, and I don't want us to not talk about this moment as we kind of near the latter part of our discussion, not the end, but the latter part. But we're in a moment now where there is a lot of money out there. I mean, we don't have to wait on the new green economy, which is coming, by the way, and automation is coming, and they'll probably be here right around the same time. But this may not be the .com era, but this is a pandemic era where we have $2 trillion out there in transportation dollars as we sit here and have this conversation. We have another 1.5 trillion that, depending on how Joe Manchin's feeling, may or may not pass and Build Back Better. So, and you're already talking about the American Recovery Act dollars that are already flowing throughout our communities right now. So how do organizations like yours, Mark, and how do companies like yours, Wole and Cheryl, and how do individuals who are watching this and people in the C-suite, Yvette, my question is, how do we ensure that we don't miss this moment with the money that's here and the money that's coming, and that, the McKissick firm gets its fair share of these dollars, transportation dollars? What do we need to be doing to ensure, because we just can't have any more empty promises because the money is here now? I want to start with Mark on this, and then we'll go around the table because I want all of you all's perspective.
It's a good question. It takes continued pressure. It takes continued public pressure from civil rights, economic justice advocates, politicians, and electeds. It takes continued pressure. It takes public policy. It requires public policy. Parent Mitchell fought generations ago for laws that said that the government would do 10% of the surface transportation bill with minority-owned businesses. It takes public policy intervention. At the National Urban League, I'd highlight two things. We have an ecosystem of 13 entrepreneurship centers. We provide free coaching and counseling services to mostly African-American business owners to help them learn how to take advantage of procurement opportunities, to gain access to capital, and to grow their businesses. Secondly, we've worked with a coalition of civil rights organizations to enter into these diversity agreements with T-Mobile, with Charter, with Comcast, through which they operationalize their commitment to supplier diversity. In each of these commitments, there's been a request and a commitment that they meet an overall goal, $1 billion or $2 billion in diverse spend. We've tried to make this more than a handshake and turn it into an agreement. We're in discussions now with two other companies, and we is a coalition of 6 African-American, Latinx, Latino, and Asian American organizations working together on, if you will, the participation by businesses owned by people of color and other issues of diversity. But we've got to elevate economic inclusion, and economic inclusion from a business sense, more on the justice and civil rights agenda in this country. Sometimes I feel like a lone voice in the civil rights community talking about Black business participation, talking about economic inclusion. It is about a $15 minimum wage. It is about the child tax credit. It is about family leave. But none of that makes you a producer. None of that makes you the person that sells the products, that earns the profits, that builds the wealth, that builds the assets. Black people have to be producers, not just consumers, so that we are consumers and others earn the profits, earn the revenues, make the money. That's what inclusion from an economic sense is about. It is about $15 minimum wage, child tax credit. It is about increasing pay. It is about closing the economic gap, but it cannot be closed fully until African Americans and, quite candidly, other communities of color are in the producer line, producing goods and services. One thing that was mentioned earlier that really resonated with me is the need to build domestic capacity to build products. Why can't we make solar panels in Newark, in Detroit? Why can't we make the kind of sophisticated, if you will, chips in Newark, in Detroit, or in Dallas? Why do we have to import all of these from abroad? There's got to be more determination, right, to build the things that we buy, that we use, that we need for the necessity of our life. In many respects, Bakari, it is a new economic compact that is needed when it comes to economic inclusion and participation in this country. And we've got to elevate it in the discussion. The presidential election that took place, the primaries that took place, you never heard Black business owned by people of color, as though there's something not consistent with social justice or a progressive agenda in talking about that. But that is what we are behind. Maybe other elements of the progressive community are not behind when it comes to being producers and business owners. You know, our kids don't have trust funds. You know, our kids don't have the kind of economic largesse that allows them to pursue their dreams. Many of the great tech entrepreneurs, such as Bill Gates, brilliant man, got started because his family was able to provide seed funding. His father was a very, very accomplished and smart lawyer who could guide him. It's not to take anything away from him, It's to indicate, right, that in many respects, the road for our communities and our young people is much steeper and far more difficult, but our resilience and determination to conquer it is strong.
I echo everything that Mark says. And I also, Bakari, think that what you're doing makes a difference. And what do I mean by that? The ability for you to invest in the various different series of rounds, whether it's friends and family. I used to joke when we started the company, I wanted to raise enough money from friends and family that it was enough to keep the company going, but not enough to ruin a friendship, right? Because you're not, that's risky capital. But that allowed us to go to a series seed round where we got some institutional investors and other family offices, which allowed us to get to a Series A round where we had the opportunity to get to more institutional investors, which is allowing us to get to a Series B round, where now it's nice because people are calling us and saying, hey, we'd like to talk to you and figure out if we can do something. The point of that is every great company starts with a great idea. And if we can continue to use our personal capital, as you have just indicated you're doing, to put some money with some early entrepreneurs who have a great idea, I think that will also just create a group of entrepreneurs who will go on and do much greater things than we've been able to do. But we just have to make sure that we give our communities the space to fail. We give our communities the ability to have access to our dollars to get started and recognize that failure is okay. I'll just give you one quick example of that. Well, give you a lot of examples of that. But, you know, to the extent that SoFi, which is a household name now in terms of a fintech company, the founder of that company failed in his first attempt. And the folks that backed his first attempt that failed backed his second attempt, which became SoFi. We just need to make sure that we're creating an ecosystem in our community that says failure is okay, because we're going to have enough winners that is going to make the failures something that's just a part of how you build a healthy entrepreneurial ecosystem in this country.
That's powerful.
Yeah, I would like to add to what Wole and Mark said. You know, I agree the focused and continued effort is needed, but also for organizations to utilize organizations like the Urban League. The bigger a corporation is, believe it or not, the more likelihood there is a bureaucracy and just kind of a cloud around finding the right types of Black businesses that they can partner with. It is so much easier when corporations can partner with organizations like the Urban League to find access to entrepreneurs that can help them achieve their goals and help them develop as well. And so I again make this as a call to action to say, don't lose faith, utilize the network and the resources that organizations like Mark's can offer you, because the decision-making process can be very complex. It may not be just, in many cases, solely the procurement leader. It may be influenced by the marketing manager, the product manager, the finance leader. And so it's really a focused effort that you need to have when you're targeting a handful of companies to grow with, to become their top supplier, even be relevant and stay relevant in that organization. And doing that is much easier when you partner with an organization like the Urban League.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah.
Cheryl, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, as far as making sure that Black firms get their fair share of the infrastructure bill or any new government bills that are coming out, I think, Mark, that you nailed it. You know, we have to continue to put pressure on our political leaders, and we also have to educate them. A lot of times, you know, they don't understand business. They don't understand all that we can do. And we have to explain that to them. And that has happened on many occasions. Also, we need to educate them on what their abilities are. Recently, we ran a poll just on New York State with respect to the governor, the controller, the lieutenant governor, And, we found that, there was a Black candidate out there who could really be controller. And we presented that information to him. And so I think that educating our political leaders is extremely important. And then we need to speak in one voice with all of our advocates. We all need to be saying the same thing. And it is, we now need economic empowerment. We need to get dollars to our community on a high level, and like Mark, what you were saying, the individual level. And that's an agenda that unfortunately we have not had. We have not had one agenda with everyone speaking the same thing. And so I'm getting behind Mark.
Mark is our choir director.
And everything he says, I'm just gonna mimic.
Look, guys, I've enjoyed this. Part of the reasons I'm so selfish on these panels is because I want to get an opportunity to ask you guys the questions, and as a young man, learn as much as I can from the experts that you all already are. So if you can leave us, one of the things that I've heard people say is that we have to do a better job of telling our own stories. Black businesses have to do a better job of telling our own stories. So leave the people with a productive nugget on not necessarily where we are or how far we've come, but something visionary on where we go from here, and leave them with a nugget on how we can improve this Black business ecosystem that Wole talked about, and make sure that we're clapping with both hands. Now let's start with the ladies. Yvette and Cheryl go first, Wole, then you, and then we'll end with Mark.
Yeah, I would say, again, thank you for having this call today. A pleasure to be a part of it. I would say to Black enterprise today, be intentional, be deliberate. Don't cast your net too wide. Be focused in terms of the organizations that you believe you have a product or service that they deserve to source from you. Be competitive. Understand that being competitive is total cost. So it's not necessarily the lowest cost, because you need to sustain that cost structure so that you can be alive, relevant, and profitable in the next business cycle. So make sure that you are confident in those proposals that you're putting together. Partner where it makes sense and where it's necessary, and stay committed. You will win, for sure.
And I like what Wally said earlier, and that is shoot big, go for something big. Recently, the state of New York put out an RFP to develop a site at Javits. We put together a Black development team to build a building called Affirmation Tower with Don Peoples, myself, and Craig Livingston. It's unbelievable that in 2022, there is no development south of 125th Street built by Black people of any scale or magnitude. And this would be a $3.5 billion development, providing 35% to MWBEs and service disabled veterans. And so we are shooting for the stars here, and we are saying to New York, this is an opportunity for you to do something progressive and change the paradigm with respect to Black ownership. And this is very good for ESG, because all the investors can come to our building and they can get ESG points for renting from a Black developer. And so I love that whole concept of shoot big, put something out there for others to be able to say, okay, let me think about this. And, you may win. You just may win.
Andre 3000, the great American poet Andre Benjamin from Outkast would always say, you shoot for the stars. If you miss, you'll hit the moon.
That's right.
Wole.
I think that's exactly right. And just in that spirit, I recently read a book called The Alchemist, which was actually introduced to me through Will Smith's book, which is actually quite good, which I highly recommend. But in The Alchemist, it said, when you want something, the entire universe will conspire together to help you get it. And I just think that is something that we should think about in terms of, if you want something, you got to be committed, you got to put it out there. And once you go down the path, the universe will conspire to help you get it. And as entrepreneurs, I think that's a critical component to think about. It's another way of saying you got to have faith. And if you have faith and a great idea, the universe will figure out how to help you make that happen. So I would really encourage everyone to think about the world in that way.
Mr. Mayor.
Hey, I'll start. I'll end with this. Best numbers are 2.5 million Black businesses in America. Approximately 90%, 85 or 90% of them, or let's say a little bit shade less than 2 million, have one employee. If each of those businesses hired one more person, that would be 2 million more people, probably mostly Black people employed. If each of the businesses over one employee, and there's about 250,000, we think, with an average of maybe about 5 to 10 employees, if each of them hired 2 employees, that was potentially be another 500,000 employees. Think of the impact that even modest growth in Black-owned businesses can have on our community in terms of employment and the circulation of money. So this, if you will, portfolio of work, I'll call it, around is an important part of economic justice that we all have to lift up. And Wole and Cheryl and Yvette, they are practitioners. They are all doing something significant, but very, very different from what the other is doing. But it gives you a sense of, Bakari, the energy, the talent, the determination, how impressive the talent of this generation is when it comes to this new fight for economic justice. So I just want to also close by thanking the Black Enterprise team. They are our Bible. They are our playbook. They are our reference book. They are our research arm when it comes to understanding this. And so, I just think, in the incredible legacy of the late Earl Graves, who above and beyond all was an activist and a race man and a civil rights leader and a business leader. We need to recognize that this is a time for a new call to action.
So with that being said, I always tell folk the 2 most important words in the English language are the words thank you, because they're not nearly said enough. And so I want to say thank you to all of you all for the work that you have done, the work that you are doing, and the work that you will do. Thank you all so much for joining us for another Black Enterprise panel and town hall discussion tonight. The one we just did on Black business development with this extremely, extremely talented panel is one that we can all take a great deal of knowledge from. We hope that you leave today's panel better informed, energized, determined, and committed to going out and doing something to help us build this Black entrepreneur ecosystem. Remember, you can return to watch this important conversation. You can always come back and find this conversation online. And now is the time where I do what I need to do more of and make sure that we give a special thanks to our series sponsor, which is the Executive Leadership Council, for participating and partnering and actually not just saying the words, but putting the action to the words and joining us on this shared mission of Black economic empowerment. Join us February 24th for our next town hall, which I'm sure is going to be so robust because it's on criminal justice reform. And we're going to develop and talk about developing a fair and equitable system for all. And finally, Black Enterprise is headed back to Las Vegas for the 16th annual Women of Power Summit, March 24th through the 26th. Registration is open now at blackenterprise.com/Women of Power Summit. For more information on all of these events, go to www.blackenterprise.com/BE events. Thank you so much to Black Enterprise. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Bakari Sellers, former member of the South Carolina State House of Representatives and CNN political commentator. God bless you all. Thank you and good night.